Welcome back. Finally, we get to the conclusion of our international business transaction study. We started out this topic by talking about expectations. The parties to a contract have certain expectations. The buyer expects to receive conforming goods. The seller expects to receive payment. Any number of things could cause those expectations not to be met. So how is it that we provide for each party to satisfy their expectations through the use of a legal framework? Now, the legal framework that we're going to talk about is called the documentary sale. So international trade, we know, involves risk. There are performance risks, there are transactional risks, and we know that businesses use contracts to manage those risks. And previously we discussed the risks involving performance of the obligations in a contract. So how do we satisfy the parties' expectations? Well, in this lecture we're going to look at transaction risks and the legal structures that we created to minimize those risks. Now, there are transaction risk involved in any international sales transaction. And transaction risks, when we talk about them, we are really talking about the risks that face the buyer and seller when they are moving money and goods in an international sales transaction. And these transaction risks arise in large part simply from the barriers that separate buyer and seller. And those barriers can take different forms. Now, there are a couple of types of transaction risk that we've already addressed: delivery risk and payment risk. The documentary sale provides a means to manage those risks, delivery and payment risks. The documentary sale requires a document. That's why we call it the documentary sale. And what this document is going to do is it is going to abstract the goods, meaning the document becomes the goods. And in the documentary sale, the parties are actually going to be obligated to sell and purchase a document that represents goods. Now, this document we generally call a document of title. And if you're familiar with motor vehicles, you know that every motor vehicle has a document of title attached to it. The document of title is a formal record of ownership. The party named on this title owns the vehicle. When we sell a car, we can transfer possession of the vehicle, but unless we transfer the title to the vehicle, the ownership of the vehicle doesn't change. So if you go to a person's house and to buy a car that they're selling, and they're going to ask $3,000, and you pay them $3,000 and you drive away with the car, you are not the owner of the car. Instead, whosever name is on the title is the owner. So the title is going to represent the motor vehicle. And I can sell a car without exchanging possession, meaning if I have the vehicle stored in a warehouse somewhere, and I transfer the document of title to you, and now you own the document of title, you have a superior right to that car. So we are separating possession from ownership. And the documentary sale is involves a special type of contract for the sale of goods. Now, the parties to a documentary sales transaction have obligations. The seller must place goods into the hands of a carrier, and the buyer's obligation is to purchase the document of title. And I have purchase in quotes. It's not quite purchase, but it gives you a flavor for what we're talking about. And this is going to be accomplished through the use of corresponding banks. The buyer will have a bank and the seller will have a bank, and these banks are going to be used to exchange the document in exchange for money. I have a separate video showing you how it works. But let me give you some more of the background first. Now, the document that we're talking about, this document of title, in the context of a sales transaction, is called a bill of lading. The bill of lading is the document of title. So when we talk about the bill of lading actually has three roles. First of all, the bill of lading is going to be created by the carrier, and its first function is to serve as a receipt for the goods. So the seller, or the shipper, is going to place the goods into the hands of the carrier. The bill of lading will indicate any damage to the goods that was visible or apparent, and the bill of lading will identify what are the goods that are being transferred. And so a copy of that bill of lading is going to be, or the bill of lading itself is going to be given to the seller, the shipper, in exchange for the goods. It's a receipt for the goods. Now, the bill of lading has another role, and that is the contract of carriage between the shipper, the seller, and the carrier. So it is going to be the contract that calls for the delivery of goods to a certain named place and to a certain named entity. That contract is going to be found within the bill of lading. And the third role of a bill of lading is a document of title, meaning whichever party has possession of the bill of lading has a right to obtain the goods described in the bill of lading. Just as we said with a motor vehicle and a document of title, works the same way. The party with the bill of lading is going to have a superior interest in those goods, regardless of whichever party currently possesses the goods. Now, the purchaser of a document of title has certain rights. A document of title can be called either negotiable or non-negotiable. A negotiable document of title has two requirements. First of all, it must be signed by the consignor, which is to say the shipper. The party shipping the goods must sign the document of title, and it must contain that phrase, "to the order of," or "to the bearer of." You know, on every check that you've ever seen, you don't really deal in checks much, but you've seen them before, and you know that there are those special magic words on the check that say, "pay to the order of." Well, what those words do is they render that document negotiable, meaning capable of being transferred by a process we call negotiation. And if the document is transferred through negotiation, the person receiving the document may have more rights than the party transferring the document.